Welcome, educators. Whether you are a spreadsheet, dashboard, all things data fanatic like myself, or you break out into a cold sweat just hearing the words data meeting, it's okay. I've got you. My name is Jessica Lean, and I'm your host for this podcast, Data and Education. I'm also the founder of Data Informed Impact, where I work with schools and educators all over to get rid of some of that overwhelm and make things a little bit easier for them to make the best decisions for their students. We'll be talking about all things data culture, data literacy, and data visualization. Let's get started. Welcome to Data and Education. So many school leaders I talk to are feeling completely burnt out, and my guest today has a powerful message of hope for them. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Brandi Kelly, one of my dear friends, and the founder of Spark Hope Edu, and as well as the founder of Spark Hope. She's also a seasoned educational leader with over 20 years of experience. She has a background in social work and a doctorate in educational leadership and a very unique perspective on leadership. She argues that data shouldn't just be about test scores and needs to start with the leaders themselves. We're going to be diving deep into her HOPE system and how leaders can use their own data to lead with more clarity, courage, and compassion. Brandi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jessica, for having me on the show. I'm really looking forward to this today.
Me too. I'm excited. So I gave a very brief overview of your background, but there's so much there that I already know isn't included. So go deeper into it. Tell me about your story and how you went from education into founding Spark Hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you said, I went from school social worker to superintendent, and in the middle, I was a principal. But the reason that I got into education in the first place was because of a tragedy that happened in my life. On May 12th, 1990, long time ago, um, I was getting ready for prom, and it was a rainy Saturday afternoon, and my two brothers had went on a horseback ride. And long story short, my brother Brandon drowned on that day. And it really it changed who I am. It changed my life forever. A lot of grief, a lot of sorrow, a lot of uncertainty. And the powerful part of that story is that it didn't stop there. I saw hope for the first time through that difficult period in my life. And that was through the power of community. The people in our town showed up for us in a way that I can't even really put into words. They were just there. They searched day and night. Brandon's classmates created a memory book and they shared stories about his mischievous spirit. I have to say, for the educators listening, he was that kid. He was that kid in your class who, if there was trouble, he was going to find it. But he also had that heart of gold. And they captured that in the memory book that they shared with us. And during that time, I also relied heavily on my faith. And faith has been a very important part of my story um, as it has unfolded. But because of the people, because of the community, I went into education. And that's why I became a school social worker. I wanted to give back. I wanted to be a person who lifted others up whenever they were hopeless, whenever they felt like we felt in that difficult time. And as I've navigated my career, I've just kept going up the ladder. And I've had a lot of fulfilling experiences because of the people that I believe God has placed in my life. But the important thing to note is that what you do is not who you are. And I had to learn that the hard way. As a superintendent, I hit a wall. I was tired. I was overwhelmed. I was putting in way too many hours, pretty stressed out, dealing with some health issues. And that has led me now to wanting to help people that have and are experiencing what I've experienced. Once again, I find myself kind of in a full circle moment where founding Spark Hope EDU is all born out of hardship that I have faced. And I've faced a lot of hardship. I've overcome a lot of adversity in my life. Um, And this is just another chapter in my life. And I'm tapping into my purpose and I'm doing things that fuel my passion. And I'm truly living out the system of hope that I've created.
Yeah. Yeah, that story, is so impactful, and every time I've heard you talk about it, it just, hits me all over again because the idea of, like, going through that tragedy, and I went through a similar tragedy from an outsider, from the, not a direct sibling, of course, but it was my mom's best friend's son, when we were in middle school, who passed away. And so I've also been able to see how our community was able to kind of wrap our arms around that family. And so by being a part of a similar situation, um, it's interesting because it is such a tragedy, and I can't imagine being able to go through that and then find some kind of glimmer of hope, but you were able to, and the fact that you've been able to throughout all the adversity in your life, and then able to spread that now to others is just uh awesome. I mean, it's just a wild thing to think about because I know, like, there's so many of us that have been through similar tragedies and have not been able to do the same. So, it it's a beautiful piece of a very tragic story, that's for sure.
And I think that we can find good in everything. And
Yeah.
I think it takes a consistent effort, but we have to start small.
Yep.
Um, I'm one of those people that I'm wired to, I think, always be busy, always to be doing something or chasing the next achievement. And what this season of my life has reminded me of is that the simple things are truly the big things. And sometimes we have to get still and we have to really be present to see the beautiful parts of our life. And it goes back to that what you say about being people driven. If we're going to be people driven, we have to be present and we have to help people feel seen and heard and valued. And when we're chasing things, when we're chasing tasks, when we're chasing results, it's hard to be people driven. And so I think that that is the power of tapping into a system of hope and getting really still and self-reflecting and increasing your level of self-awareness. I know you and I are kind of personality typology or personality test junkies. We're nerds in that way, but they can help us. They can help us
Yeah.
to get real clear on who we are and what our strengths are so that we can be present with the people that we are serving and leading.
Yes, absolutely. I really want to dive into the hope system, but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit more. We talked about how you mentioned that we love personality tests, so we had to go through all of our different personality types. So first, Enneagram. What's your Enneagram?
My Enneagram is a 3. I'm an achiever. That kind of goes back to what I was saying before about, always chasing those achievements and all of that. But yeah, I'm definitely a 3. What are you?
I'm a one. I don't remember what the name is for one. Do you?
A 1 is kind of a perfectionist. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Detail oriented, which is why you're good at what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I don't remember the actual name, but I do remember reading it and thinking, oh, yep, that's me for sure.
Yeah.
And then I know we did working genius, but I don't remember what I
Yeah,
think we have the opposites, right?
we
Don't
do. I am a galvanizer. I'm in the activation phase, so I'm right in the middle. Um, And definitely a galvanizer. I like to rally people. I'd like to get them excited about a project or an initiative or something that we've got going on.
Yeah. And so I'm from the opposite of whatever she is. Although I do like to do that stuff too, but that's just not as high, I guess. And then what's Meyer Briggs?
Meyer Briggs, I have taken that. I took that a long time ago. I can't remember what I am on the Meyer Briggs. Do you remember what you are?
Yeah. I'll never because I read on like, oh my goodness, this is wild. That was the first like, real personality quiz. Of course, I did all of them in, like, 17 magazine when I was growing up, but
Yeah.
I'm an ENTJ. But I
Okay.
also float a little bit to, I think, INTJ. I think I float between the E and the I. Um, but when I read the description of that, because we did, like, the extended version for work, so it was like, oh my goodness, I remember being in that group and I was like, "I this is me.
Yeah.
They know me. This is so weird." Like, even down to, like, talking about, conflict, with siblings and stuff, like, knowing how my brother and I communicated, like, oh my goodness, it was so wild. So ever since then, I've been a huge fan of the personality test. I always tell people, like, because there's some people who are like, they take it and they're like, "This isn't me."
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm just not a very unique personality type or what, but they know me every single time.
Well, and my husband on the Enneagram, I felt that way. Whenever I took that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me to a T. I mean, it described my fears, my desires, my motivations. I mean, it really described me to a T. And so, of course, I came home and I had my husband and my daughter and my son take it. And
Oh,
interestingly enough, my son and my husband are both eights, which is a challenger. And totally fits, totally fits. But of course, my son's like, well, I don't know if this is right because, this kind of could be very generic. It's kind of like anybody could fit in this category. I'm like, honey,
sounds like you're challenging it.
it's you. Exactly. He's a challenger. He challenges everything. And I think it boils down to your personality, right? And it was just really interesting. Now my daughter and I are both threes. And so it's been really interesting for me to watch her in her career because she's doing some of the things that I did early in my career, always very busy, always very focused on the important projects that she has going on. But I think that the difficulty in that, Jessica, is that sometimes if we're not intentional about being people driven, we can lose ourselves and we can lose what's important in the process. And that's what we have to safeguard against.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like I it's hard being someone who is a perfectionist and like I'm just like, no, first numbers. Like I want everything to be like quantified. I want it all to be in rules. I want everything to be like laid out. But then when you're working with a group of people, that's not how
No,
everyone thinks. Like you have to learn to adapt,
you do.
and figure out a way to work with people, and not, I mean, and not be so rigid. Like it's just not. Flexibility is such a huge part of leading change in schools. You have to be able to be flexible, with your staff and with your students. You have to be able to know when to take feedback and when to be able to implement that feedback. And I learned that the very hard way when I started becoming or start working as a data coach. Because I was like, oh no, this is easy. This is what we do. Da, 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 da," and I started pushing out data and everything. And I was like, whoa, people don't like this.
Mm-mm. And it's funny
They
because
think I'm mean.
yeah, what you're talking about is our pastor has been doing a series on the messy mission. And that's kind of what we do as consultants now, right? We are on a messy mission because anytime people are involved, it can get pretty messy pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And, I talked a little bit about my story and the trauma that I faced. Well, let's face it, we have a lot of people who are carrying either firsthand or secondhand trauma.
Yep.
They are feeling stressed. They are feeling overwhelmed. They are navigating a lot of things. There's a lot of potential obstacles that they're carrying around in an invisible backpack. And we have to be cognizant of that when we're dealing with people and give grace. But it all starts with us as individuals. Change starts with me. We hear that all the time. But what I don't think we realize is that the hardest person to lead is yourself because we get so stuck in our own minds, right? We get so fixated on what's right or what's wrong. I've kind of had to come through the process through coaching and a lot of intentional work on myself of moving away from black and white thinking. Oftentimes, I used to think it had to be this or that. But in reality, we don't have to choose one thing or the other. It can be both. We just have to reframe it and to work through those challenges. John Maxwell says the hardest person to lead is yourself. And again, that's why I think the Hope system is so transformational in leadership, in organizational change, and finding those metrics that you talk about to measure what is important to us and to help us to grow both individually and as a team and as an organization is so very important.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to talk about the measuring part too, because uh, we can't forget that this podcast is about data, not about personality tests, which I would love to talk about for another 3 hours, as you know. But before we do that, I want to talk about the Hope System. You just did a book study this summer that I participated in, and it was such great conversation that stemmed from this system. And so I'd really love for you to break it down for the audience, and for those of you that are listening, obviously you might not be seeing that Hope has periods in between. So each of the letters stand for something. So go for it, Brandy.
Yeah. So the HOPE system is an acronym, and H stands for habits. And those habits encompass your mind, your body, and your spirit. I think we have to look at the whole person when we're considering the habits. O is optimistic outlook. So that's the mindset piece. That is, looking at the way that we view the world, the lens through which we see the world. And oftentimes, that is through the trauma, the tragedies, the shared experiences, the things that we go through in this life. P is purpose, passion, and perseverance. And it's a trifecta. It's very important, all three, because our purpose is why we're here. Our purpose is what gives our life meaning. But if we are not fueling our purpose with our passion, it's easy to lose our way. And so we have to persevere. We have to persevere through those obstacles and consistently uh, go back to our why, go back to our purpose in this life. And then finally, E is excellence. Excellence is um, just getting better every day, becoming the best version of ourselves so that we can lead ourselves well and we can lead those in our circle of influence well also.
Yeah, I love how much it's focused. And I mean, like you said before, the Maxwell quote that I'm not gonna be able to repeat word for word, but, like, you're spitting on yourself, right? Like, you are taking that time to reflect on your own, habits and the way that you think and your why and all those things that are important when it comes to, grounding the work that you do, and I think, it's as educators, we do have, that, oh shoot, I don't know the word that I'm looking for, but that natural intuition of like knowing how to reflect on things and knowing how to grow ourselves. We like learning, right? But when you're in the middle of everything, it's chaos. Like it's really, really difficult to take a step back and to think through those. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear just like what kind of advice would you give someone who's like maybe they just start school, right? Like we're a few weeks into the school year for some of us, or if you go to my daughter's school, you haven't started yet and you're still at home driving your mom crazy. But for the us that are in the middle of it already,
Yeah.
beginning of the year, everything's happening at once. Um, what what advice would you give someone in terms of taking that step back and really grounding yourself and the reason why you're doing the things you're doing?
Yeah. So I say that it's all about an intentional practice of self reflection to build self awareness. And then that helps you to build your belief in yourself, your self efficacy. And if we got really honest with ourselves, some people, and I'll use my husband for instance, he is naturally gifted with a high level of confidence. He's always had that high belief in himself. He's very self assured, very confident, very, you know, has a lot of self efficacy. But not everybody has that. And when you're in that messy middle, when you're in on that messy mission that I talked about before, you're in your classroom maybe and you have 25 students and they all have a need. And then your administrator comes in and they need something. And then your colleague comes in. I mean, you're trying to do so many things all of the time. And it's easy to kind of feel like you're letting everybody down. And I think in education, we often have an unrealistic expectation for ourselves. So, the best advice I can give educators, no matter where you're serving, whether you're a teacher or a leader or somewhere in the middle, um, take some time for yourself. Practice the pause. Every morning I get up, and it took me a long time to get here. It didn't happen overnight, but I get up every morning and I have quiet time. While I'm drinking my coffee, I am pouring into myself, either reading the Bible, listening to a podcast, doing something that helps me to be grounded in the day. And then I set my intention for the day. Yesterday I set an intention for the day. And when I looked back on that today, I didn't do anything that I said I was going to do yesterday. And I think we have to give ourselves grace too, because today was a new day. It started over and I'm able to try again. And already today I've gotten my exercise in. I'm eating healthy. I'm um, doing a podcast with you. I am checking the boxes on my intention. But it all starts with getting still, pausing, investing in yourself. Um, we don't do a good job of investing in ourselves. We invest in everybody else because that's who we are. That's why we went into education. But if you don't invest in yourself and prioritize yourself, sometimes you lose yourself in the process.
Yep. Very, very, very true. And it's funny, like I think back to like when I was working near, in an actual building, like I can say it's easier for me to have my me time now, and I'm sure you're experiencing the same thing. Easier on one hand because you have the flexibility in your schedule to make sure that you get that in somewhere. Whereas when you're working in a district or you're having to go in every day and you have that set routine, it's much more difficult to get that time in there. But then the flexibility of the schedule also leads to lack of routine, which makes things much more difficult,
Oh,
which we've
yeah.
had lots of conversations about. Right. But when I think back to when I was in the midst of everything, and to me, the days were super long because I also was driving for a substantial amount of time before and after school because and that's something that I did throughout my career. I always worked at schools that were further away for some reason. It just
Mhm.
never worked out to where I was close enough.
Yeah.
But that drive in was my only me time. Like it was the only time that I could fit in, but I made it happen. And I would take that time headed to work to listen to this podcast and reflect on myself and the growth or the things that I need to work on. And then the time back was typically a different kind of me time where I usually had to turn off anything. Like, I could not have any sound because my brain I call it brain buzzing, because there was so much in my head by the end of the day that I just needed silence.
Yeah.
And I needed to give myself the time to let my brain wander
Mm.
and not focus on anything in particular. So, um, it's always a challenge to find those moments, but I do think that it's important to have both that time to grow, but also that time to just like sit still.
Yeah. That's very well said. And I will share with your listeners, Jessica, it's a leader's wellness checklist, but really and truly anybody can use this checklist because let's face it, we're all leaders in our own right. We're leading ourselves, our family, our classroom, a school, whatever. But in this wellness checklist, sometimes we think if we're going to take a break or do something to invest in ourselves, we have to have this huge chunk of time. But research shows that micro breaks are really effective. And so if you can just step away from your desk for 5 or 10 minutes between tasks or every hour, that can do so much to reset your brain. Practicing that mindful breathing in that time, stretching or a short walk, it resets your energy. It resets sometimes your focus for what it is that you've set for an intention for the day. And like I said before, we need to just start with one strategy. Maybe this week you're going to start with setting a boundary to protect your time or focusing more on sleep and recovery or doing the micro breaks. But once it becomes a habit, you can add another, and those small, consistent steps lead to sustainable change and stronger leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember talking about this in your book study about when I realized that I thought that I was taking these micro breaks and I would take them and then scroll on my phone and then it wouldn't feel like a break. Even though it
Right.
seems like it might be a break, it's not a break for your brain. So I learned that if I literally just sat there and stared at the wall for 60 seconds, it
Yes,
would feel like more of a break than being on my phone for 10 minutes. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. And
yeah.
think about the neurochemicals in your brain, just getting up and moving. We
Mhm.
are such a sedentary society that when we sit, they say sitting is the new smoking. It's so bad for
Yeah.
your. So if we can, just move our bodies, think about classrooms. What do we do with our kids? We give them brain breaks. And when we give them brain breaks, we intentionally have them get up and move their bodies. That's because that helps to shift back into that prefrontal cortex. That helps
Yep.
them to regulate their emotions and to think more clearly. And that also fosters a better learning environment. So we need to do the same thing for ourselves as adults that we do for our kids. But oftentimes, like I said before, we're so focused into pouring into others that we forget that we have to lead ourselves well first in order to lead others well.
Yeah, absolutely. So and you hinted at this earlier on that you have a way of kind of measuring and when we talk about measuring, I want to remind everyone that measuring doesn't necessarily mean that we need some kind of number attached to everything. It could also incorporate some different kinds of data instead of just, oh my goodness, the words. What am I looking for?
Yeah.
Qualitative data.
Qualitative,
Wow.
yeah, qualitative and quantitative data.
I promise I know things about data, okay, you guys?
We all have those moments, Jazz.
Like, the word. It's not, we don't have to just look at quantitative data. We can also look at qualitative data. And you've mentioned that you have this survey, or this way of this wellness assessment. So I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So in my work with Spark Hope Edu, I'm partnering with schools to provide a wellness assessment. And that wellness assessment starts with a survey that I give to staff. And it's focused on improving your organizational or your school district wellness, rooted in habits, optimistic outlook, purpose, passion, perseverance, and excellence to improve your level of wellness. It improves your self efficacy and collective teacher efficacy. And it also fosters that climate and culture that we want to see in our schools. And the end result is that it improves retention and recruitment strategies. It creates an environment where people are seen and heard and valued. Um, you know, People don't leave organizations because of the place necessarily. They leave because they don't feel seen, valued, and heard. And so, what I do with this assessment is I start with the survey and then I do a deep dive and I do interviews to get more richer data, richer qualitative data. And then I do school and classroom observations. I triangulate that data. I look at the 5 essential survey. I bring in other metrics that maybe the school district provides for me. And then I compare that with a rubric that I have created to determine the level of wellness in your school district or organization. And from there, I give them a comprehensive report with very simple, structured steps that they can take to improve the level of wellness in their organization, to definitely improve recruitment and retention, and just to make it an organization that people want to come to work to every day, and a place where people would refer, like for you, Jess. I mean, when you think about where you work, if you're working somewhere and you don't refer your friend to send their child to that school, or maybe you have a friend that's getting a job and you're like, oh yeah, but I wouldn't work there. We don't want that to be our school. We don't want that to be where we're working or where we're sending our kids. So let's take some intentional time to survey what it looks like. Take a good look at the truth, and then make some steps, simple, strategic, intentional steps to improve the cultures of our schools and our districts, because our kids deserve it, our teachers deserve it, all of our staff deserve it. And I think that is the way forward in improving this crisis we have with not being able to find good people to work in our schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was fortunate to be in a district that noticed very early on that um there was a an epidemic of like educator mental health. Like we were having these things happen in our schools where it was just like, well, what's happening to all of us? Like, what is going on? And I think a lot of it had to do with like, when COVID first started, everyone's like, oh, thank God for teachers because I don't want to teach this to my
Right.
kid. And then all of a sudden it was like whiplash. All of a sudden it was like,
Yes.
no, you guys are awful. You're the worst people ever.
Yeah.
And what it led to was just like this um feeling of like not being in control,
Right.
which is a very it's hard to focus on growing yourself when you feel like everything around you is falling apart.
Yeah.
Um, so like I said, I was fortunate to be in a district that noticed very early on that this was a problem and ended up going to uh, down to 4 student days a week and dedicating Mondays to planning and to meetings so that we could really focus on um, giving teachers the time to sit and reflect on their lessons and to reflect on the data and make sure that they were planning things that were best for their students. And actually, this is third year. We're going into the third year of having Mondays off. I say we because they're still my family.
Yeah.
And there's been a substantial amount of growth, more growth in these years with fewer days out of the week than there was when we had all 5 days. So it's really been incredibly impactful. Um, but even so, there were times when that wasn't enough.
Right.
There were schools in that district where that wasn't enough. And so to take the time to really like get pull together all of that qualitative data and really dig into, what's missing here. Because it feels like, you're giving them a whole other day of the week. Like
Yeah.
what else could they possibly need? But sometimes you need to dig a little bit deeper and see, what could be at the root of that.
Yeah.
Um, I had a pretty good idea of what was at the root of that, but it's since been fixed. So
Yeah. Well, and you talked about that uncertainty that everybody felt during COVID, not to bring up bad memories, but when you think about that, those moments, that was a trauma.
yeah.
And like you said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I do counseling. And when you're thinking about your trauma and you're dealing with uncertainty in your life, it's like a snowball effect. And it just, gets bigger and bigger and bigger if you don't deal with it. And the only way you can deal with it is to take a good hard look at yourself. And that's hard. Change is hard, especially when you are asking me to change something about myself that has served me well for 20 years or
Uh-huh.
30 years or 40 years. It's uncomfortable. It's hard. And not many people have a support system that will help them to
Yep.
navigate through that difficult time. And I talk about that as well. Just having a support system that, encourages you, lifts you up, tells you the truth, right? I think we're very fortunate, Jess, because we're part of a support system like that. We
Yes.
tell each other the truth. If things work, great. If they don't, I'm going to tell you the truth so you can get better and you
Right.
can serve the people that you are trying to serve in this consulting network that, we're part of. But it's hard. Change is hard. And the only way to get better is to deal with the difficulties and to make small steps forward. And you may have to change them. The steps you make may not be the recipe for success, and you may have to do some trial and error. But surround yourself with a good circle that's going to
Yep.
support you and lift you up. And I think that's going to help you find some joy in the journey.
Yeah, when I think about the times in my life where I've grown the most, it's when I've been parts of groups that have been that support system. It wasn't done alone. So it really goes to show how important it is to have that collaboration and that safe space to have those conversations.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up, you mentioned the checklist. We'll make sure that we add that in the show notes. And tell us where people can find you, especially if they want to hear a little bit more about the wellness assessment.
Sure. They can head over to my website, sparkhopeedu.com, and you can connect with me on social media. I'm on most of the social media platforms. My website or my email address is there, and I would love to connect with you. And I am creating a Hope community, a community where I will be launching on October 8th a leadership coaching cohort where we will be unpacking the system of hope. We will be connecting with like minded leaders, and we will be fostering that kind of environment that lifts up, that supports, that encourages, that holds each other accountable and helps us become the best version of ourselves.
I love it. And as someone who went through your book study, you are amazing at facilitating those kinds of things. And it's just such a good thing to dedicate that time to that reflection. So what a great opportunity. I will add all of those links and make sure that all of your socials are in the show notes. I appreciate you so much for coming on and talking about how we can continue to stay people driven and make sure that we're not getting, lost in the sauce of all of the numbers and everything and really keeping ourselves grounded and reflective throughout the school year.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on the show. This has been a great conversation. And I look forward to seeing what you do in the future as well.
Yeah, lots of exciting big things coming.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Brandy.
All right. Thank you, Jess.
Well, my friend, did you enjoy it? I'm really hoping the answer is yes. And like every other podcast out there, I'm going to ask you for some big favors. Can you please make sure that you're subscribed? You don't want to miss the next episode, I promise. And then if you could leave a review, that'd be awesome too. If you're on YouTube, by the way, there's this great thing that you can do where you just go to the box underneath the video and type in your thoughts, ideas, wishes, hopes, dreams, and hit comment. And it shows up under the video. It is public, just a warning. But I'd really love for you to do that. Share with me. What did you think about the episode? Or what are your dreams in life? It's okay. You can really leave any kind of comment. And I'll do my best to respond. Above all else, I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.